Japanese games. Some of the best and most influential games ever released have hailed from Japan. From Super Mario Bros. To The Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy, the creative output of this country has massively contributed to shaping what the video game industry has become. One of the biggest players in this space was Square Enix, or Squaresoft back in the day, releasing many influential titles in the RPG genre like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or Chrono Trigger. Although they have a very strong catalog, they do tend to put out some stinkers every now and then. Especially in recent years, it sort of feels like they have lost a little bit of the status they once used to hold, with quite a few missteps and failed projects. In my last video, I talked about one of such missteps with a game called Lord of Arcana.
Arcana.
Whatever. It's a PSP game from 2010 that unfortunately had missed the mark both critically and failing to establish this IP as a new big household name, which is what every gaming company is chasing after. But amazingly, that wasn't the end of the road for this game, because about a year after its initial release, an updated version by the name of Lord of Apocalypse would be released in an attempt to fix some of the issues its previous iteration had. Maybe, just maybe, this new game would have had the potential to completely flip the script and turn this franchise around, and I wanted to find out if that was the case. Because Lord of Arcana was a game that I absolutely adored as a kid, even with all the issues it had. So, after my previous video, I decided to embark on this new yet familiar journey of rediscovering what the obscure and flawed game I played as a child could have been like given some more time in the oven. And what I found was a truly transformed experience. Almost every aspect of the original had been revisited and improved or changed to a point where I could really feel this game have an identity of its own, past awkwardly combining the obvious influences it drew from many other games. Don't get me wrong, at its core, Lord of Apocalypse is still the same game as its predecessor, but the feedback they received let them vastly improve upon the original's vision, ending up with a much more refined and, ultimately, fun product. Ironically, this is how Monster Hunter, the series I compared these games to in the previous video, has been doing business for over 2 decades. The iterative design approach has been proven to work insanely well for a few franchises, up to a certain degree of course, but we sadly don't really get to see a series grow into itself like that anymore, because everything needs to be super successful immediately, or otherwise big corporations and shareholders see no value in it. And conversely, if they do find something that works, you already know that they're gonna run it into the ground. Now, with that being said, this approach doesn't work for every type of game, but at least in the context of Square Enix and Lord of Apocalypse, I really think that it was successful. The biggest roadblock it faced, in my opinion, however, is that Square Enix decided, probably based on the performance of the previous game, that they wouldn't release it in other regions. It ended up being a Japan-exclusive experience, which is a shame because I believe that it possibly could have succeeded in the West, if my experience is anything to go by. And speaking of which, I think I've stalled for long enough, and I should actually tell you what it's like to play this game. I hope it's been going well though. It's very tough. Can't get really keep doing that real quick. The differences found in Lord of Arcana and Apocalypse are numerous and vastly vary in terms of how impactful they are, but I think the easiest way to explain everything is to simply take you along on a quest with me, because what I said about the original gameplay loop in the previous video still applies here for the most part. Monster Hunter-esque questing with a focus on preparation beforehand, like in many other games from that series, and a similar gearing and upgrading system makes up a large part of the experience, among a few other influences it has. But once you've loaded into the quest, everything just flows together so much better than in the previous game. It is insane. I've already mentioned this at the end of last video, but one of the biggest and best changes to this version is that you can fight the regular enemies without having to go to the separate instanced battle arena and cutscenes associated with it. In Lord of Arcana, you would have to fight every monster you saw in this way, and it really made for some boring quests here and there. But that's not how it is in Lord of Apocalypse. You see an enemy you want to smack around? Just go up to it and whack it until it's dead without interruptions. Absolutely slog that guy. Everything from XP to monster drops happen right then and there in the field. After defeating an enemy, you also had to manually pick up everything it dropped, while you were also under pressure from timers. This wasn't the worst thing in the world, but they still overhauled it and made it so you can just walk over an item to automatically pick it up without creating an interruption in the flow of gameplay. This relieves Lord of Apocalypse of much of the tedium the previous game had suffered from, and it only gets better from here. 2 entirely new weapon types have been added to an already decent selection. These cool twin swords that I personally decided to go with, as well as some tomahawks. But having to slowly level up to unlock the full moveset of your weapon was another quirk which they thankfully decided to get rid of, and instead you only have to wait to get the battle arts, which are your special attacks. In order to avoid your weapon proficiency from becoming obsolete, the battle arts are still acquired by simply leveling that up. And trust me, you will love them because they are incredibly strong and really cool to use. Thanks to this, the flow of combat is so much better right from the get-go in this game. There are no weird pauses in your moves that feel artificial because they didn't make you wait until you can see your weapon's full potential. And this is honestly how I would describe a lot of the experience when comparing the two games. There's simply a lot less interruptions, which makes the gameplay feel much smoother as a result. Adding to that is the ability to simply hold down the interact button when picking up materials laying around in the locales, to quickly deplete a node without needing to spam press the button so you can grab everything one piece at a time. Kill everything you have in here. We get so many cores from this. So this is another new aspect of this game. So you can get cores, like these big items, from small enemies as well, and you need to get a lot of them in the original game. And right now we have an Arcana zone. Oh no, it was only active for like a very short time here. And in this game you can farm them way quicker. And talking about items also leads into the next big change, which is that you don't have to do any more inventory management mid-quest. In Lord of Arcana, you frequently ran into the issue of needing to deal with an overflowing inventory during a quest, as you had very limited space, similarly to how it was in the Monster Hunter games. Your healing items and monster drops would occupy the same slots, with only 16 of them available. So the game would constantly ask you to drop materials, which would really be great to keep at times, but you would just have to figure out what the least valuable stuff to drop is. And all of this was also happening while you were under the time pressure from the end of fight screen. But none of this is an issue in Apocalypse. Oh, yeah, by the way, I'll just start referring to these two games by the ending of their name for convenience sake, if that is okay. You have no say in this, why am I even at? Inventory management is not an issue here because they have separated the items you prepare for a quest and the drops from monsters and everything else. Now that I think about it, there never once was an instance where I had to ditch an item, so it's possible that there's no limit to what you can take out of a quest at all. This change in particular is a pretty big deal because it has some huge implications for the amount of grind required to get stuff, but it also takes away some of the importance of quest preparation and tension in certain situations. You don't have to make any trade-offs when it comes to what healing or support items you can bring without limiting the inventory space for grinding materials too much. This is a departure from some of the Monster Hunter influences I saw in this game, and I will tell you how I feel about that in a little bit because it has both positive and negative effects. But for now, let's continue with some more really awesome things that this game is doing to make it a way cooler experience than its predecessor.
I only do like a little bit of damage to that.
On the hand, like on weak points, or like on breakable points. Oh my god, he hit him out of it! Holy
big man,
shit!
Big man!
So far I've only covered the regular enemies, which apart from a change in battlefield, haven't really evolved all that much. But one of my biggest complaints was that even the elite or boss monsters would end up being boring to grind because of the small amount of attack patterns they would cycle through. Thankfully, the creatures in Apocalypse have vastly improved movesets. I cannot stress enough how much better fighting elite monsters is in this game. That does also include the Drake Shade, which I've had a little meltdown over last time. Overall, these monsters now have interesting new attacks on top of what was already there, while also having extra animations and flourishes in between to more seamlessly transition from one attack to another. This makes the fights more interesting mechanically, visually, and combined with the combat feeling better, simply much more fun than in the previous game. All of this obviously applies to the Arcana Guardian bosses as well, so they ended up stealing the show even more so this time around. There's even 2 entirely new bosses in this game, which really took me by surprise, but also was a much appreciated addition. These bigger fights will still take place within a separate battle arena, but I don't actually have many issues with this, as they are much more elaborate and still fast-paced enough to not be disruptive. They even added a little mini game before engaging with the boss by having to lock onto their gate while dodging these weird lasers. Honestly, I don't really know what to make of this, but it's kinda cool, so I'll let it slide. Yeah. What is that run?
Why is he running? Why did he...
Okay, quick editor's note here. I realized that I had been showing something in the footage all this time, which I actually haven't directly mentioned. Even in the previous game, you were able to cut off or destroy specific body parts of bosses, which is even necessary to obtain most of the pieces of gear associated with them. This is also how it works in Apocalypse. However, they have added many more weak points and destroyable parts to those bosses, and even to the elite enemies, making fights even more dynamic than before. Another thing you'll surely have noticed is that I've got a companion with me. Lord of Apocalypse provides you with a host of different NPCs that you can take along on quests with you, or even when playing multiplayer with a friend. They will support you in battles, dealing damage and sometimes healing you, but also grab extra materials, so grinding for stuff with up to 3 of these NPCs can be beneficial. To unlock them, you'll have to speak to them in the village and do a little quest in order to recruit them to your team. Once you've reached a certain point in the story, you can select and deselect who you want to bring on a quest at will, in case you want to go solo for a greater challenge. It is a little annoying that you don't have a choice but to play with them until then, but I digress. His walking cycle is so goofy. That looks a little bit like a crocodile running. Oh god, stop. Get away from me, you freak! With the final few hits of this cutscene, we have finally finished the quest. I deliberately chose a more involved and lengthy one because we had a lot of different bullet points to address for the changes found in Apocalypse, but I think this sums up most of the things pretty well. There are a few more minor things sprinkled all throughout the game, and a couple of extra additions like a parry and counter move that is very effective on certain enemies, or the Conquest mode which lets you send some of your companion NPCs on separate missions for extra rewards. But for the most part, we've covered all of the important differences you should be aware of. Based on how I've talked about Apocalypse so far, I think it's pretty obvious that I had a great time, even outside of the nostalgia I hold for this specific series. Can you actually call it a series if there's, like, 1.5 games? Whatever, that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that this game is a resounding success in my eyes. Player feedback has been taken into consideration and the developer actually acted on it, which is always awesome to see. One final interesting comparison to make here is showing you 2 quests side by side. This goes into bigger spoiler territory, but I assume that you don't really care about that at this point. One of the main bad guys you are meant to take down during your playthrough is called Vermilion. He sort of acts as a final boss, and has a pretty damn elaborate quest to go with it. I will now show you the same quest in both of the games, side by side, to show you how much of the tedium has been cut out in the newer version. In the original, this quest genuinely took me about an hour. To be fair, I am playing solo here, and in Apocalypse I was doing some sweet co-op gaming, but even without that, I probably still could have cut the time it took down in half. And while this comparison is still playing in the background, I think I should come clean with you guys. I am fully aware that I've sort of been hyping up this game to be possibly more than it actually is so far. Focusing on the improvements over the original game was one of the main goals of this video, because that is ultimately what I want you to take away from all of this. But I also have to do my due diligence and talk about some of the more negative feelings I experienced during my playthrough. The streamlining of combat and other systems are a major improvement to the moment-to-moment gameplay feel, like I've already explained, but it came at the cost of feeling inconsequential at times. The difficulty of the original was brutal. It's not the most difficult game ever made, but making a mistake could cost you dearly in terms of resources, but even worse than that, time. You had to carefully consider your moves and decisions while you were in a quest, because failing could mean having wasted almost an hour of your life. The preparation to go into said quest would also matter, since your chances of succeeding would vastly differ depending on what you would end up bringing with you. This design choice is what mainly made me compare the original to early Monster Hunter games, because all of these little decisions you had to make felt very important. Being punished for your mistakes in this way gives some satisfying weight to your actions, especially once you finally succeed after having failed a few times. But this is not how it was in Lord of Apocalypse. From the very moment you start your first quest, you can tell how much more fast-paced absolutely everything is. And it's already dead. I'm just pressing my special attack button and it's instantly dead. This is insane. Gameplay speed, progression, grinding parts, and acquiring gear happened so much faster in this game that I was really taken aback by it. Not having to go to the separate battle arena for smaller enemies was an amazing improvement, but their health pool is low and your damage output is much higher than before. The same thing can also be said about the bosses. While being much better, the fights lasted only a fraction of the time it would take in the original. The game was super easy right from the get-go, and yes, it does get a little harder later on, but during the main story and first exposure to new monsters and areas, it felt like I was just breezing past everything. Speaking of the story, there is much more of it here, and I would usually consider this a good thing because we get to know a lot more about the world, the Arcana Guardians, or characters and their motivations, but sadly, this is where the game being a Japan exclusive has sort of become an issue again. I know a little Japanese, so I was able to tell that the story is pretty much what you would expect it to be from a game like this, but having no proper translation just ends up hurting this aspect again, so I didn't really mention it. I think he's literally just giving the exposition of, oh, you need to go and like hit up all of the Arcana Guardian bosses to meet his master and like puzzle together what happened. I think he's literally just like going through that spiel. To finish off my little rant about the difficulty here, I should also acknowledge that I obviously played co-op with my friend, and we've also just gotten a little bit better at playing games compared to when we were 12 playing Lord of Arcana for the first time. But that doesn't change the fact that Apocalypse simply is a much more streamlined experience. Funnily enough, this is also one of the criticisms I have for Monster Hunter Wilds, but the gameplay is a ton of fun, but it came at the expense of losing some of the charm the older games used to have. A proper and well-written critique for Wilds has been in the works for a while, by the way, which is hopefully going to go up on my main channel soon. But what I believe has happened to Lord of Apocalypse and why it feels so different to progress through is that the developer ended up overcorrecting the mistakes they had made in accordance to the feedback they got from the first game. They were so scared to hear players call this updated version boring or tedious again that they turned everything up to 11. So now, instead of having to grind for something, possibly spending hours trying to get just one new piece of gear, players just sort of get everything handed to them on a silver platter. This might sound a little harsh after I spent a lot of time saying so many good things about this game, but I really needed to get this off my chest, and it would also feel a little disingenuous if I didn't. Something that might rectify these issues a little bit is that if you never played the first game, this could potentially not even be a problem for you, as you have no frame of reference to compare it against that makes you say, oh man, I wish they would have paced it just a little bit slower. Developers, or rather publishers, just give up on games and franchises insanely easily. They do that so quickly nowadays because it's just not profitable enough immediately for the shareholders, so they don't have time to refine it. Whereas, like this, I think this franchise could have been something that's actually pretty decent if they had some more time put into it. But yeah, that's not how it works. Despite this caveat at the end here, I'm still of the opinion that Apocalypse is a major improvement, which probably would have been way more popular than the original in the West, if it actually released over the pond. It has a more refined identity as a Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy, Tales of adjacent hack-and-slash RPG, buzzword. What I want to get at here is that this could have turned into a series like God Eater, that has some very obvious inspirations, but still found an audience by having a different focus and being appealing in a slightly different way. The edginess of armor and weapons, the bloody carnage of quickly beating down the smaller enemies, or the cinematic boss fights could have turned into what defines the series, if it would have been allowed to grow further. But I get it. The games were flawed, people didn't love them enough, or rather they didn't buy them enough, so Square Enix pulled the plug and cut their losses. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that gaming has become maybe too big for its own good, so now every game needs to be a smash hit in order to have a chance at being improved with a sequel. Back when Lord of Apocalypse came out, it wasn't even as cutthroat as it is now, but it's still a shame that it went to the chopping block after not even getting the chance to be played in the West. And with that, we have finally come to an end of the Lord of Saga. It was brief, but still provided me with some great enjoyment, especially since I finally got to talk about a game which 12-year-old me absolutely adored. If you were to ask me if I would recommend you to play either one of these now, I'm honestly not too sure if I could do so with confidence. Despite Apocalypse being an overall better experience, you will still have to deal with the lack of translation and some other annoyances, so you have to be someone who's specifically into these games. If not, my videos here probably provided you with most of the entertainment you can get out of them. And speaking of which, if you did enjoy my coverage, make sure to like and subscribe. I will be posting more videos on Monster Hunter likes, Souls likes, and a few other gaming topics that I really enjoy, so it would be great to see you then. But for now, thank you so much for watching.